Is it on? Oh God, sorry. Okay, good morning everybody. I've got a clicker. Where do I, I'm sorry. Well, at least we're getting this out of the way early. Oh wait, yeah, good. We're gonna get my slides up. Yeah, please bear with me. I am extremely hungover. It's funny because, you know, it was in the pub last night and I was being the one giving everyone beers and being like, yeah, let's keep going, and now I'm absolutely paying for it. So bear with me as we go through this, and I'm gonna talk about something that's extremely ambiguous. I don't think anybody really knows what L2s are. I don't think people actually know how they work. I think we all disagree on how they work, and that's fine. But we're gonna basically talk, like at a very high level, about how these constructions and these new blockchains that everyone's talking about work. It's not magic, but I'm gonna wave my hand and say magic a lot during this talk, just because, you know, we have 15 minutes and there's a lot of semantics. My name's Janusz. I am the founder of a project called Bitcoin Layers. We analyze sidechains, L2s, different types of federated applications on Bitcoin. I've also contributed to Espresso, which is an infrastructure project in Ethereum, building shared sequencing infrastructure. And I've also contributed to a number of like privacy projects as well before. So let's get into this, L2s. So disclaimers, I'm actually a Bitcoin maximalist, kind of. I was using Arbitrum yesterday, so I don't know how much of a Bitcoin maximalist I am, but you know, a little bit. I'm going through an existential crisis related to rollups right now. I used to love rollups. Now I think I'm not sure if they're like the end game for scaling. And I don't really know how this works, but we're just gonna have to wing it and see how it goes. So rollups, right? It's not just a tasty snack, it's the scaling solution that everyone likes to talk about nowadays and says is the future of Ethereum and also other blockchains. The definitions of rollups is rollups are blockchains that use another blockchain for data availability. So they post their state root, their latest state root, and enough transaction data to reconstruct the blockchain from Genesis if they need to. They typically have some mechanism to validate state transitions, so that's something like fraud proofs or validity proofs. And they're also typically what people, when you hear the term L2, people are typically talking about rollups. So this is how like transactions on the L1 work. You get a bunch of users, they're having a great time, they throw some transactions in for a swim in the mempool, and then the selected proposer in Ethereum will take all of these transactions and order them in a block, and then the other validators will verify the block, and then that they all agree on the updated state, and it synchronizes, and that's how a transaction works. So yeah, this is Susan, and Susan has a bit of Ethereum. She's having a great day. And this is the infinite garden of Ethereum, and it's the infinite garden of applications, right? So she's having a great time because she gets to put in all these transactions and use all these fancy apps and do a bunch of crazy stuff that she couldn't otherwise do in traditional finance. And it's like Freddie Mercury, right? Don't Stop Me Now, that song by Queen. You guys know that one? She's singing it all the time because she's just in the infinite garden doing all these transactions, and it's great. Don't stop me now. But then a bunch of kids come up to the garden, and they are screwing everything up. They've got bottles, they've got beer, this one's setting the hair on fire, and they're just throwing transactions all over the garden, and they're just filling it up, and it's making it really slow and congested. So what happens now is we have this garden, but we have this thing called fees, and the fees kind of have this AK-47, and they're shooting it at people and saying, don't come into the garden, because now it's really expensive to access, so they can keep all of these like ragtag kids out of there. So Susan's like, I was promised permissionless finance. I was promised to be able to do transactions whenever I want in any way. She's like, what am I gonna do? Because I can't use this blockchain anymore because it's so congested. Rollups. And it's not just the snack. So rollups, is Susan, still sad, is gonna put her ETH into this bridge. And it's really secure. It's almost as secure as the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And then the bridge will like do some fancy stuff and then spit out the ETH onto the rollup. So now Susan's back in the garden, but it's a new garden, and she gets to use all these applications that she was using on Ethereum, but she gets to use them cheaply, freely, etc. So in these rollups, so remember, you know, these blockchains that have this bridge and, you know, inherit some security from Ethereum, they have this thing called a sequencer. Who's familiar with the term sequencer? Who knows what a sequencer is? Okay, a couple. Okay. Sequencers are basically the thing that orders transactions in the rollup. So all these users, like the L1, will just submit transactions to the mempool. The sequencer will take those transactions and then order them within a rollup block. It will execute those transactions and then post a summary of the state to Ethereum. So essentially, users do a bunch of transactions, execution, and then they post it to Ethereum, where what we talked about, there's some mechanism typically to validate that those transactions were executed correctly and the state transition is valid. But I have a problem with these things, and this is really a big thing related to my existential crisis, is that this thing right here, this sequencer, this little box, in every, I don't want to say every, but I think every rollup or other implementation of rollup-like blockchains today is completely centralized. And it's run by one company that is the one that created the rollup, and we are trusting them to include our transactions, to not reorder transactions maliciously to extract this weird thing called MEV. And we're just like sitting there like, hopefully they let us play in their infinite garden, because remember, we got to go all the way back. Susan is in the infinite garden, she's happy, but a lot of the time Susan doesn't know that there's just this one box that's controlling the garden. So remember, Susan is using the rollup, but then this box, and all of a sudden she's like not allowed to use it anymore. She's like, what's going on? I was in this infinite garden. Everyone promised me permissionless finance, right? And the problem is this little box, the sequencer, is like to Susan, she's like, fuck off, Susan, you can't use the rollup anymore. So she's, yeah, the sequencer literally just picked Susan out of the transaction, the transactions that were in the mempool, and just picked it and said, I'm not going to include you in a block, and I'm not going to let you play in the garden anymore. And that is the sequencer. So when we have this construction of rollups and we think about these things, they're essentially these blockchains that are operated by a single entity. And they control everything that's going on, and these things have millions and millions and millions of dollars locked in their contracts, in their bridge contracts, and people are depositing millions of funds, and there's tons of transactions happening, and it's all controlled by this one box. So when we look at rollups today, there is a ton of activity happening on them, and it's really cool to see that we can scale blockchains by essentially creating more centralized systems, but have some guarantees that if everything went down or everything went to shit, we can't exit the system, right? That's a topic for another talk. But it's really cool to see that when you look at the transactions that you see over the course of time, I don't know if you can see this because the colors are a bit off, but transactions are like the rollups are scaling Ethereum, and they're processing much more transactions than the Ethereum L1 today. There's loads of total value locked on these systems. But we do have to remember that they are completely centralized. So when we think about the future of these systems, there's a few things we can look into the research of this, right? Like you have teams like Espresso and others that are developing ways to decentralize the sequencer function. In ZK rollups, there's this role called a prover that proves that state transitions were executed correctly. That role also needs to be decentralized, because if the sequencer passes on the state transition, and the prover can just be like, I'm not going to prove it, or it goes down, or it goes offline. So we have this situation where there's a lot of fails things that are just going to stop the rollup from working. So when you think about this in the future, is you have to look at these systems, you have to look at the research that people are doing to decentralize it. So you have like the projects that are decentralized sequencers, you can do things like base sequencing, and a variety of different things. So if we get to this end state where we still have the ability to scale throughput and scale the amount of transactions we can process, but also have decentralized operators to ensure that everybody can go into the garden and play and be able to use all these systems, then we're in an end state where rollup successfully scaled Ethereum. I do not think we're there yet, and I think in the next talk, we're going to talk about potentially the ways that we can do that. So yeah, the summary of everything that I just went through is that rollups help scale Ethereum's throughput by taking all of the transaction execution off-chain. They're just doing all the transactions, batching them, and putting less they're having less congestion on the L1. Rollups are blockchains. A lot of people don't know that, and they kind of think that they're these magical systems. They're just blockchains, so essentially like trustless side chains, and they're operated all by centralized parties with plans to decentralize their architectures. So that is a summary on rollups, and yeah, if you have any questions, happy to answer them. Okay, go ahead.
These sequencers, do they work also with BTC transactions? Because we get a lot of
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was like, are sequencers specifically just a thing in Ethereum? The answer to that is no. So you can basically have any blockchain can do this construction called rollups. Like I think people are trying to do rollups on Cosmos-based blockchains. They're trying to do them on Solana. They're going to do them on Bitcoin. And the sequencer is just the centralized role of like doing the transaction ordering and inclusion. So what's kind of interesting is when you look at how these things are built, a lot of people like they have these like SDKs or companies that help people set up rollups really quickly. So you can, a lot of teams will spin up one of these blockchains in like a couple months if they work with like a third party, and they're based on like certain frameworks, more rather. So you can like take an OP stack from Optimism, like an Optimism rollup or a Polygon rollup, and you can kind of like customize it a bit, but launch it kind of out of the box. So what's happening in a lot of other ecosystems, like Bitcoin, for example, is they're just taking all of the code from Ethereum rollups, they're forking it, and they're just running it on Bitcoin, essentially. Not really, but that's what they claim. And they have centralized sequencers because all the rollups on Ethereum have centralized sequencers, so they kind of just do a similar construction. So yeah, to answer your question, this type of sequencer role in this type of architecture would be if any blockchain wanted to roll up to another blockchain, then they would have this type of role. Yeah. Any other question? Yeah, in the back. Yeah. What do you mean by like environmental aspects? Just want to clarify. I don't have an answer to that because like I don't think proof of stake blockchains like Ethereum have this issue with like what people consider like to be like harmful to the environment. I know a lot of people have issues with like proof of work systems like Bitcoin. I haven't done any analysis on how rollups can help alleviate that. I think though when you look at it, it's like the goal of what I see like in Bitcoin specifically or other chains or Ethereum is like we're just processing the ability to do more transactions. So like the congestion on the L1 will like kind of remain. So we're just processing the ability to do more transactions, and we're just compressing that data to make it more efficient to post on the L1. But the L1 will end up still being congested in the long run, I think, for most of these systems. Yeah, of course. Any other questions? Got one here. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is a great question. So the question was like, if you have a centralized sequencer, can you still have like a unilateral exit mechanism? The answer to that is yes. That doesn't exist, I think, in like most rollups still have some like, there's still some like permissioned actors, but theoretically you can unilaterally exit if you're censored. You can do like a forced inclusion transaction and forced withdrawal. I think the problem though is like long term. So let's look at this, right? Like let's say there's billions and trillions of dollars like on these like a Bitcoin, Ethereum, these blockchain systems. The cost to do a unilateral exit transaction is going to be really, really high. So if you get censored by the sequencer, and let's say you've only got like $200, $300, $400 in one of these systems, to unilaterally exit to the L1, the transaction fees might be as much as the total amount of value that you have locked in the system. So if the centralized sequencer censors you, and you can't afford the L1, because the unilateral exit is always going to rely on an L1 transaction, and if you can't afford the L1 transaction because the fees are so high, just due to the nature of like so many people using these systems, then the unilateral exit's only going to be afforded to people who can, or like the wealthy or the privileged who can afford it. So I would say that like when you think about these systems in the long term, you can like take like the protocol modularity thesis. You don't have to design like decentralized sequencers or supporting infrastructure in the same way that you design Ethereum. You can make different trade-offs because in the end you do have this mechanism to like try to ultimately inherit Ethereum security. So like you can design blockchains in a way that decentralize, maybe not to the extent of Ethereum, but enough to avoid these situations of censorship and still maintain the performance of centralized architectures. So that's when like you look at these decentralized sequencer protocols, they're all built on different consensus mechanisms than what Ethereum is built on today, because they want to do different trade-offs for performance sake, while still being decentralized enough to ensure these things like censorship don't happen. Yeah, from a sequencer perspective, everyone should check out the Aztec forums. So Aztec is an L2 on Ethereum, and they're building like a privacy-centric rollup, and they're going to launch completely decentralized. So they're going to have decentralized sequencers, they're going to have decentralized provers, they're going to have a decentralized governance mechanism to if they need to, I think it's around upgradability, to like if they need to upgrade the chain. So they're just not relying on like a multi-sig to do that. So they have a lot of really good research on how teams can think about this and approach this. And it's also my understanding that sequencer protocols like Espresso and other protocols in the ecosystem are going to be launching later this year. So rollups will have more opportunities to look at this decentralized architecture, because it's going to be available to them if they want to outsource. And then additionally, like a lot of teams are starting to research themselves. Like Starknet, for example, is looking at using like Comet BFT style blockchain to like do decentralized sequencing, and that's one thing they're researching right now, for example. So I think it's it's probably taking a little bit longer than it should. I think there's a lot of risks with running centralized sequencers, and I think people are potentially, when a lot of this, like when Aztec launches and other systems go live, they'll be able to like look at these as like not proof of concepts, but they don't want to be the first mover necessarily, because if the system, they just want to see how things play out first, and then when more teams are adopting these things, and I think you'll start to see like a knock-on effect of everybody trying to opt into this more decentralized architecture for L2s. Any other questions? Cool. I think we're good. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Second to get my slides set up. I'm not as good of a public speaker as Ian is, so I'm going to be looking at my deck a lot more. So, hey, what's up, guys? I'm excited to be here with you today to talk about consumer crypto of the past, present, and future. I'm going to start this talk by setting some context and covering some historical UX issues that have plagued crypto. I'll outline some trends that I think are promising and ushering in a new era of crypto UX, and then I will try to give some practical advice to builders that are trying to revolutionize the way users use self-custodial crypto. So first, who am I? Why should you listen to me? I'm Jack. I'm an engineering manager at MetaMask. I've been building consumer crypto for the last 6+ years, both on the dApp side with teams like Sushi, and on the wallet side with teams like MetaMask. So, the basic premise of my talk is that crypto is still, self-custodial crypto is still way too hard to use for 99% of the world. And I'm going to kind of explain why and some potential solutions. So here's what crypto looked like when I joined the industry back in 2017, 2018. My first ever self-custodial crypto wallet was Mist, which was developed by the Ethereum Foundation. You had to sync the entire Ethereum network just to use the wallet, which was a pretty terrible experience. I remember sitting there waiting for like 3 days for my Ethereum node to sync locally before I could actually send any transactions. And then MetaMask came along, and it had this, kind of crazy idea to bundle or unbundle the node and the wallet by providing like a remote RPC connection to a node that was already synced, so that you didn't have to do this like 3-day wait before you could, use your wallet. And so this is kind of the set of user expectations back in those days. onboarding is complicated. You needed to use seed phrases. You needed to have some sort of extension, browser extension or mobile app to use crypto. You had to write your seed phrase on a piece of paper or like engrave it in metal and store it in a safe so that, if your computer ever broke or you couldn't get access to it, you had this backup and could, restore your wallet to a different device. And then the other part was transacting wasn't easy. It was L1 first. Transaction fees were super high. You had to deal with these things called ERC-20 approvals, which were complicated and most people didn't really understand. When you were confirming a transaction, you just saw this big block of hex, which basically nobody could understand what it meant. You had to do network management. You had to understand what gas was and why you had to use it. And so this is what crypto looks like today, basically. Uniswap, MetaMask, Rainbow. We've gotten sleeker looking UIs. We've gotten lower gas fees with L2s. We have more ubiquitous on and off ramps. We've slimmed down onboarding flows and allow users to back up seed phrases to iCloud. We've made transaction confirmations more readable and added nice features like simulations to most wallets. But there's still lots of problems. And I think that the main source of these problems is that we've been stuck in this existing paradigm of crypto applications for too long. And we've solved some things, but we've also created new problems. So going back, let's revisit kind of the user expectations that were around in 2017, 2018. As you can see, we've made some progress, but not a lot. Much of the user friction that existed 5 years ago still exists today. We've improved manual seed phrase backups with things like backing up to iCloud. We've reduced the gas fees by introducing new high TPS chains like Solana and Ethereum L2s. Back in 2018, there was only one really EVM network, and that was just Ethereum mainnet. I'm not even going to talk about Ethereum Classic. That's a whole nother topic of conversation. But all of these new grade L2 chains that allowed for lower transaction fees also introduced this new problem, which is now you have assets on 1, 10, 20 different chains, and you have to understand where your assets are, where the apps you want to use are deployed, and figure out how to get from point A to point B. And ultimately, we're still stuck with a lot of the critical UX issues that existed in 2018 or today. Things like approval of transactions, seed phrases, having to know what network your app's tokens are. And these things scare a lot of crypto-curious people away, people that have maybe used Coinbase or Binance before, but haven't been willing to take the leap into self-custodial crypto. So now that we've covered the past and present, let's look forward and try and think about what the future can hold. So the first, is this not going to work? Okay, interesting. Well, there was a GIF of Privy on this slide, which is no longer there for some reason. But basically, Privy is an embedded wallet solution that allows you to create a wallet with something as simple as like a social login, Google Auth, Twitter Auth, etc. And the second example, which is also not going to be here, is Coinbase Smart Wallet. It's similar to Privy, allows users to create wallets using their biometrics as opposed to like a social auth. So think Face ID, Touch ID. And if you were able to see the demo, you would be able to see that like within 30 seconds, a user has landed on the demo site, created a wallet, and purchased an NFT. And so this is a far cry from having to download a wallet app, onboard there, save your seed phrase before even using the app like users are doing today. It actually did work. Okay, so that's what Coinbase Smart Wallet kind of looks like in practice. So as you can see here, they're creating a wallet using a passkey. Oh, okay, interesting. And there is a whole other part of this GIF, but it doesn't seem to be working right now. So today I'm channeling my inner Steve Ballmer. So this is the new set of new user expectations. Low tolerance for onboarding friction because it's super easy to create and onboard to an app L2 first, no more companion app or browser extension, centralized exchange-like transactions, and easier recovery mechanisms. And so I'm channeling my inner Steve Ballmer today and shilling embedded wallets pretty hard. I think they're the cornerstone of all the innovation that's happening at the forefront of crypto UX. Creating and onboarding to your first wallet is a journey that every single crypto user has to do. And if the start of your user journey sucks, you're going to scare people away. That's why I chose to highlight things like Coinbase Smart Wallet and Privy instead of the many other innovations that are happening at crypto UX. But there are many other innovations that I also want to highlight today. But first, I want to just talk about the other kind of advantages of this new style of crypto UX, enabled by things like account abstraction, chain abstraction, and DApp style permissions. So first of all, products can sponsor user gas costs, simple Web2 user style user onboarding and login options, easy account recovery. Users don't need to know what chain their assets are on. Products can specify granular permissions for assets, like swapping $10 of X asset weekly until next year, or subscriptions, and batch transactions so that users never really have to understand the underlying semantics of something like an ERC20 where you have to approve before you can swap, and sending multiple assets at once, which right now you have to do multiple approval transactions and then potentially multiple sends as well. And if you're looking to build a product right now on top of all of this, new innovation, it's not that easy. There's all of these new EIPs coming out that on what feels like a weekly basis, and trying to make sense of all of this is really difficult, even if you're spending all day on like Ethereum magicians, Ethereum forums, and crypto Twitter. And so what I propose, instead of thinking about things in terms of EIP numbers, think about it in terms of broad categories. So the first is embedded wallets, which I talked a lot about before. The site can create a wallet for users, no need to download another app. Account abstraction, accounts are more powerful, can abstract away gas from users and batch transactions. Chain abstraction, users no longer need to worry about what chain your asset or product is on, and permissions, allowing apps to grant more granular permissions over your assets, like swapping $5 for ETH once a week until next year. I think the intersection of all of these things is kind of the future of crypto UX. And keep in mind that a lot of this is very bleeding edge and may not be fully ready to be built on today, but should be soon. So these changes can seem daunting. If you're an existing crypto developer or a new crypto developer, revamping or building a whole new sort of onboarding process without a lot of good examples and like stability of the tech is really challenging. But I think that this effort is absolutely worthwhile because it will enable more users to access and utilize your products with greater ease. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, I just want to warn that you still need to build good product. Solving onboarding and making transactions easier doesn't replace like product market fit. But if you have some product market fit or you're aiming towards product market fit, I think you should definitely be paying attention to what's happening in the space. And so I wanted to kind of just talk about some recommendations that I have as someone that's kind of like looked around the space quite a bit and has been thinking about this for a while. So consider if DApp-specific or portable embedded wallets makes more sense for your product. Privy is an example of a DApp-specific wallet. So think FriendTech, Fantasy.top, and lots of others. Coinbase Smart Wallet is an example of portable embedded wallets. It's basically an alpha release now, but I think will be adopted pretty quickly just because Coinbase is behind it. And I think this may not be a long-term kind of consideration or decision that DApp devs need to make because things like Privy are already integrating Coinbase Smart Wallet, so that might make things easier. Sponsor gas for users where it makes sense. batch transactions when possible, allow creating accounts with multiple different types of authentication if possible. The same thing applies to recovery. Educate, but don't overwhelm users. Passkeys are like an implementation detail, not a feature. I think when users come into your app, they just want to be able to use it. They don't need to know like what's going on underneath the hood. Users may not want recovery at first, and I think we've seen that just with like the seed phrase paradigm that, even if you prompt users very heavily to back up their seed phrase, they might not do it anyway. And so I think, it's on us as developers and product builders to prompt users to back up their wallets when it makes sense. Things like when a wallet has been funded or when the assets go over a certain amount is a great time to like further reprompt users to back up their wallets. And another thing that is important is don't exclude traditional wallet users like EOAs, MetaMask, Rainbow, Rabby, etc. I think there's lots of new challenges ahead with this new paradigm. So like embedded wallets have security trade-offs versus traditional wallets, and I think that's important to keep in mind. I think it's a worthwhile trade-off to make because especially if you are not excluding traditional wallet users, you're just offering the user a new option that makes it easier for them to onboard. I think another challenge is that some of this stuff pushes complexity from the user to the dApp developer. So I think dApps are going to get more and more complex under the hood. Another big question is like with these like dApp specific embedded wallets, like how do users manage all of their wallets across all of their dApps? Potential to increase reliance on centralized services like iCloud and Google is another issue that I see, and like the possibility of increasing vendor lock-in with these new SDKs, just because all of them work differently. The methods might not be shared between them, and so if you use ZeroDev or you use Privy, you might end up getting locked into their ecosystem, which is not great, obviously. And this stuff is bleeding edge for a reason. Be prepared to chew glass. It's not going to be easy, but hopefully in the next 6 months, year, 2 years, a lot of this stuff is going to stabilize and it's going to become much easier to build on top of. And yeah, I have some other kind of further reading for people that kind of want to dive deeper on some of this technology. Hopefully we can share the slides so that you can kind of access these links a little bit more easily. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for your time, and yeah, happy to field any questions right now.
That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
I work for Bitcoin.com. I'm the head of global support. So we get a lot of queries where this is for the normals, right? They get scammed a lot.
Yeah.
And this, I know you probably know this has been an ongoing issue. And so first question is, what do you guys do to at least, if you cannot prevent it, minimize these issues? Second, we get a lot of users who forget to write down their recovery manual backup, or when they perform a cloud backup, it will create a master password, right? So sometimes they will even forget that master password, which will save a decrypted file, right?
Right.
Or encrypted file, sorry. What are your suggestions for those type of users?
For sure. So yeah, I mean, working at MetaMask, I can definitely relate to people getting scammed all the time. It's something that, MetaMask puts a lot of effort and support into. I think some of the things that we've done recently to try and improve that are things like malicious transaction alerts, so using, third-party repositories of, scammers, hackers, whatever it is, to kind of warn users before they transact, so that, before they click that confirm transaction button, they have lots of red warnings that makes them maybe reconsider their decision. I think transaction simulation is another really important piece there. It's obviously not perfect. You can still kind of work around transaction simulation in certain scenarios, but I think, it's another good data point for users to like rethink about what they're doing. And the second part of your question was the cloud backup. I think like some of the embedded wallet stuff definitely makes cloud backups easier because, with something like a passkey or privy, passkeys are by default uploaded to iCloud, so there's no master password. It just lives in your iCloud. You can use it cross device. If you lose a device, you can kind of just reload it back onto that device. And something like Privy with social login, obviously, the security of your account is then tied to the security of the social login that you have, which again has security trade-offs. But I think for a normie user that is just getting into crypto and maybe has a few $100s, I think it's a much easier and more familiar process than seed phrases, manual backups, master passwords and stuff like that. For sure. Any other questions? Cool. Thank you so much, guys.
Hello, hello, hello. All right. Good morning, everyone. How you all doing? Bit hungover? All right, I'm going to switch it up a little bit and take a much sort of higher level view. And, the sort of prompt here was current and future trends of crypto. I want to sort of make a little argument, if you like, that the state of play in crypto at the moment, we're at a fork in the road of how things might play out, let's say. So a bit of background on me. I'm a physicist by background. I did a PhD in physics many moons ago. That's why I'm called Dr. Nick. And then I moved through kind of learning theory, got very interested in collective intelligence, and then sort of institutional governance and stuff. And I want to expose a little bit of learning theory ideas to you to kind of frame what I think is going on in the perception of crypto at the moment. So a bit about the 40s, 50s, the way we thought about learning was informed by a lot of basic psychology, like Skinner boxes. So like rats in a cage, where people would hit a feeder bar, and the right stimulus would make people learn. And that kind of all got shifted upside down a little bit in the 60s by people who called themselves constructivists. And it's this idea that the way that you frame the world happens in kind of schema. Like we have a lens on reality. So if I just ask you to think for a minute, if I get you to imagine a McDonald's, so just picture one in your head. You've probably all got a similar picture in your head, right? You've got the red chairs, kind of yellow M. You probably recognize the uniforms, and it's like that's what you call the schema, right? And McDonald's have done very well of having this schema for a McDonald's, same everywhere in the world, right? It's a good way of reaching agreement on something. Now, your little view might have had one of those online, sort of digital check-in things where you can add your menu on, right? It might not have done, but now it probably does. When you're thinking about it, you can picture this kind of digitalization of McDonald's. It makes sense, right? You can imagine McDonald's doing the nice capitalist thing and automating as much as possible, and it just fits in, right? And that's called assimilation, right? So if I give you a schema and you can understand it, it slots right in. You don't need to. It's very easy to learn, right? But sometimes I might try and ask you to learn something, and it comes into conflict with your existing worldview, right? The schema that you have of reality, it doesn't quite fit within. My argument is this is where we're at with crypto, right? There is a tension between these two things, what I call an epistemological tension. So the way that we view the world is in conflict with one another. So the nature of permissionless technologies does not vibe with the way that the traditional centralized way of the financial system works. There is a tension between these two things, right? And some of these schema that you have are really root and branch, right? So now if I tell you, think about your McDonald's, and I say, now, McDonald's have started to hire bonobo monkeys to run McDonald's. Like, can you imagine a McDonald's run by monkeys? You'll probably think, no, absolutely not, that's crazy. But if I walked you up to the door in front of McDonald's, and sure enough, there's monkeys running the show now, that would cause an ontological shock. You would go, holy shit, McDonald's is now run by monkeys, that's wild. And then you'd have to deal with it, right? You'd just have to deal with the fact that your reality is different than what you think it is. And this is about where we're at, okay? So there's the regulators and the people who are looking at crypto are trying to force it into the old box, right? So they're trying to say, do it like this, right? This is what regulations implicitly are, right? They say, do it like this. Now the problem is, the monkeys are running the show, and they do it however they want, right? The equivalent of decentralized systems, a crowd of people can run a decentralized financial system via a DAO, is the equivalent of saying monkeys now run McDonald's, right? It does not compute, right? So the way in which the kind of traditional system is looking at crypto is they're trying to put it into a box that doesn't work, and consequently they're in this epistemological tension. They can't think inside this world. It's beyond what's called the bounds of rationality. So what we have is a traditional system that's trying to conform things into a schema that doesn't fit. There is no known force in the world that can stop a group of pudgy penguins from launching a meme coin, right? It cannot be done. You can't stop people from launching meme coins now. But the instinct is to say, stop them, right? So there's a tension. And sooner or later, I think we're going to hit this moment of ontological shock where, oh shit, we can't stop this. What are we going to do now, right? So I think we're at this fork in the road, and it has like a couple of different directions in which it can go. One is accommodation. So accommodation is that you reconstruct your worldview for the new thing to fit within it. You go, okay, the monkeys are running the show, now I'll just accept the fact that monkeys now work in McDonald's, right? And you have to rebuild your world view to shift your epistemology into a new one. And this is a really root and branch epistemological shift. It's going to take a lot of thinking and changing a different view of the world for this to work. But that's what basically needs to happen, because there's not much you can do about stopping decentralized technologies. They are decentralized. So I've just come back from East Berlin. There's a hackathon there, and there's people making tools that can publish to the Ethereum blockchain. There's nothing much you can do to stop them. Same is happening here, most likely. And this needs to be sort of processed by the system, by reality, if you like. And largely, I think we're getting a little bit of both of this, right? So accommodation would look like, you know, we end up with laws that recognize that permissionless systems exist, and these are the ways in which we can integrate it with the fiat system. And we start to recognize that maybe the laws that we made in 1930 to stop people getting scammed in orange groves don't quite fit the new digital reality, and something as different has changed. And largely, we haven't got to that point yet, that recognition that new systems exist now. So the rejection looks a bit like make the developers liable and throw them in jail for making open source code, right? So we have this conflict, and at the moment we're in this state of conflict, and it's going to go one way or another. So yeah, the sound of that, Mr. Anderson, is the sound of inevitability. Things are going to happen, and there's not much we can do about stopping it. This is one of the things that I think will facilitate accommodation, is the recognition that these systems are not going away. It used to be like, oh, right, yeah, crypto may or may not work, you know. Long time ago, back in 2016, 17, I realized this was just going to happen, and there's nothing much you can do about it. So the kind of inevitability of these systems is going to start causing a kind of immune system reactions around what's going on. So where are we now? I think because of this rejection, because of the way in which crypto systems are sort of being treated at the moment, you know, we're starting to try and criminalize developers for publishing code. We're starting to get very aggressive regulations which push systems into behaving in certain ways that essentially go against the affordances of technology, right? So let's install KYC at the blockchain level, right? Well, that's kind of not the point. We might as well use a database, right? So they're trying to force the system into it, not really recognizing the inevitability of a lot of these systems, and consequently it just like ends up in this increasingly conflict-orientated thing where we keep getting more and more aggressive, and people just keep doing it anyway. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at now. But there's something interesting that happens in a lot of these systems. We're at a moment of incredibly fast, iterative development of innovative systems. I've been following emerging technology since I was a kid, basically. I've always been a bit of a techie. But the rate at which the next innovation is happening is increasing at an accelerating rate. And you know, you have these people who call themselves accelerationists who are like, yeah, let's just get there as quickly as possible. In fact, we're going to be really effective about it and get there as absolutely as quickly as possible. And then there's kind of another group of people like saying, right, whoa, slow down, right? And in fact, people are trying to pass laws that put a cap on Moore's law at the moment. And this is actually passed in Silicon Valley. And there's this huge sort of tension around trying to moderate the rate of change in technology. And there's simply not much you can do about it. The sort of argument is that we just need to find ways in which we can accommodate the reality that we exist within now. So there's a few things that I think are going to like really stick the kind of, poke the sort of beast of this tension. One is DAOs. I believe in DAOs. I've been building DAO infrastructure for 3 or 4 years. And there will be a moment where we get 1,000 DAOs a day. That is, people are just coordinating in groups, pooling money together and getting shit done. And that will happen in such a way that anyone can do it anywhere, and there's kind of templated patterns for organization and coordination, and that just like they bloom on the internet. And there's not much you can do about it. People are now operating outside of the financial system. They can coordinate money together and get stuff done together. And that is really going to freak people out because people will have their own sort of uncensorable pots of cash and will in fact start doing stuff, and they don't need a bank account. The other is crypto AI. So the merger of these two things just so happens to be the exact regulatory frontier. There's another one of these conflicts happening with AI at the moment, with a lot of people sort of saying, oh, right, these might turn into gods that come and turn us all into paperclips, right? And what these people are doing is manipulating what's called the dread factor, which is I can shape your perception of risk by amplifying the doom ending, right? So if I can get you to think of AI in the same way you think about a nuclear bomb going off, then you're scared of it, and I can manipulate your perception of risk. These two things are going to merge. It's kind of where I'm working on now. And there's going to be a huge sort of tension between centralized systems who want to protect their moat and the kind of unraveling and these things. And it'll actually be DAOs and AI merging together that really gets things going. So crypto AI is going to be a huge frontier. The two actual disciplines are both families of automated technologies. And yeah, they go together like cheese and wine. They work together very nicely. And yeah, the next sort of major frontier that's going to sort of poke the beast is privacy technology. So at the moment, one of the big epistemological tensions is anti-money laundering laws, right? So people will say anyone using privacy technology is facilitating or participating in money laundering. But again, there's not really much you can do about mathematics. So essentially zero-knowledge cryptography, there's a new frontier of cryptography opening up. There's a radical new shift in the way that we think about cryptography. Historically, we've largely done this very defensive fashion. Let's protect my data. Let's hide these secrets locally so no one can steal them from me. But a new era of cryptography is opening up, which allows us to be very proactive about the use of cryptography and use it to share information in a very selective and directed manner. So a lot of new technologies will emerge in the very near future, which allows us to really shape and control the flow of information that we have. And again, there's not much you can do about stopping this. It's simply mathematics. You can write zero-knowledge proofs in 10 lines of code. And that's open source public domain knowledge. And so we end up with this tension. The more that we end up going down this road, the more it puts a pressure on the creation of hard privacy technologies. And we've got this kind of tension of power between the state trying to say, stop that, and that actually creating more of it. So yeah, there's a really interesting sort of dialectical relationship between surveillance and privacy. And really, that's where this kind of tension comes in. The other is tokens. We've now got the ability to create money and operate our own money printers. We've decentralized the creation of money. And that really is a game that has been sort of controlled and dominated by centralized actors for a very long time. So the decentralization of crowdfunding, the kind of disrupting venture capital, DAOs and things like funding public goods, all of this is in tension with the current game that likes to protect its monopoly on it. And the kind of trigger point of all these things is it's going to sort of amplify in different ways. And largely this fork of the road at the moment is starting to become a political issue, right? So you've got the anti-crypto army, probably the biggest political self-own in history, possibly, was the American Democrats kind of trying to set up the anti-crypto army, thinking they were going to get a lot of public support for it. All those people have moved on to being angry about something else now. And actually all the crypto people who still are crypto people are now just siding with Donald Trump because he said he's going to pump the bags. So largely this will become a massive political issue. So over the remainder of the year, crypto is going to be this hot button issue that's going to be talked about for the remainder of the year, and it's going to get more partisan, and it's going to get absolutely horrible. But what it might do is trigger this very international discourse around the very nature of our interaction of like freedom on the internet. And largely we're ending into this like two different ways in which we can go. There's one that's really dark. And the way in which you try to stop people and you keep rejecting these systems is through global ultra-surveillance, right? That you start to try and clamp down on open source software, you try and stop those hackers from publishing things to the blockchain. I've recently told people, just release your code in a white paper, like good old-fashioned pen and paper, that's nice and safe. Don't publish it to a blockchain, oh, that's dangerous. And so we're getting into this sort of discourse around like, actually, you shouldn't be publishing code openly. There's people who are trying to criminalize open source technology, like anything, particularly on the sort of AI frontier. If you are making AI generations without the appropriate disclaimers, then you are essentially breaking the law for creating fake news and other things like that. So there's this huge tension. I'm not a big fan of WorldCoin, if anyone follows me. I think the reason being is because it's one of these tools that give you absolute control over people. So if I can get you to bond your biometrics to a digital ID, and then I can revoke that digital ID and remove your access to things like the internet, I can go to a kind of like level of absolute control, which is what's going to be necessary to stop people using crypto, basically. And the other side of it is that we just recognize that these tools and systems are an affordance of human collaboration and coordination now. And essentially, the game theory of this is that adopting into it now and endorsing it and developing it into a direction allows you to steer it into positive outcomes. So I do believe there's a world where we can kind of work synergistically with permissionless technologies. It's always going to be technologically on the frontier. It's always going to be a niche activity. And actually, the people and institutions that start to work and understand that how these affordances can be very good for the world, which I think moves us into these like visions of open and mass collaboration, are the best outcomes. And largely, you just have to give up this idea that you can control people and stop people using them. So yeah, that's my cheery morning story. But yeah, happy to take any questions or thoughts. Yeah.
Do you think there's anything we can do as like local people to help shift the overhead window towards accommodation?
Yeah, I think there is, and I think it's at the moment it's pretty easy to just point at us and say, yeah, look what happens when you let the monkeys run the thing, right? We get all this like grimy meme coin stuff. We get celebrity pump and dumps. We just get garbage, right? Just like abstract Ponzi-nomic gambling games and not much else. What we need is new applications that are actually demonstrably good for people, right? It's really time that we start to leverage these technologies where you can look at them and say, yeah, okay, that's made those people's lives better, right? It's one of the reasons why I was so interested in DAOs is that one of these kind of local coordinations, and we're doing work in kind of North London with trying to on-ramp community groups on these things to show that they can collectively govern a bit of local property and a commons together and things like that. And you can say, okay, yeah, that is better, right? That is a good affordance and use of the technology that's actually improving these people's lives. You can't really argue with that being a good thing. We just need a lot more examples of that, right? So we need to start building actual demonstrably useful tools that are improving people's lives, so it gets much harder to just say, let's just ban and stop it all, it's all for criminals and idiots, and it's just gambling and nonsense and all that sort of stuff. So we just need the real use cases over here to start to drop, basically. Yeah.
So to build on that a little bit, how do we get from, I'm talking about legitimate culture coins and meme coins,
Yeah.
things that are doing massive market caps, not necessarily Ponzi type
Yeah.
pump and dumps, but things like Rift.com. How do we get from there to logistics, protocols, like stuff that is demonstrably good, but when the clever people can work on these meme coins and culture coins and turn over quite a lot of money very quickly, like you have to steer people in the right direction. How are we going to get there?
Yeah, that's an exceptionally good question, and one I think about an awful lot. For one of these things, it's like at the moment, it's very easy to get away with just scamming, right? There's the way that most of the token economies are set up are just highly extractive. So most of these meme coins last like 3 to 6 hours or something like that, right? They just have like momentary lifetimes because it's basically what I call a rug dance. They're just like, people are just kind of making a bet that I'm going to get out of this thing before they rug me. So what I think needs to change is a kind of standardization around our token economies that make it much more difficult to extract value from them and just fail the game straight out. So one of the things we've been working on is just simple token economics infrastructure that limits the ability for whoever set the thing up to just rug the value out of it quickly. So better token economics infrastructure and standardization about how we set these systems up. Like eventually even the degens will say, I'm not buying that coin because they're holding all the tokens over this side and I'm just waiting for them to rug me. If the systems, and largely I think like DAO infrastructure and things like that can solve this because like the reserve tokens are all held under effectively community control. Any tokens on this side of the game are vested in a particular way that they can't just be yanked out, you know, the liquidity's locked, and there's like a game that actually, if I'm going to launch a meme coin and build a culture around it, I have to actually do the culture, right? You know, in order for this to trade off, I need to do the thing. So I think there is game theoretic structures that make it difficult to just scam, that could in theory shift the market structure into sort of positive outcomes. So yeah, largely things like actual decentralization practices is what we need, where if you can cut down the ease at which it is just like, oh, it actually becomes difficult to actually bootstrap a meme coin and make money out of it, but if you do it, it pays off better and for everyone. That's the kind of structures that we need, I think. Any other questions, thoughts? All righty, thanks very much.
Vincenzo from ETHDublin is coming up next.
Oops.
All right, yeah, I'm Vincenzo from the L2Bit research team, and as you may guess, I'm going to talk about L2s. Right, so if you're familiar with L2Bit, you're familiar with the risk assessment framework. It's a risk rosette of 5 categories. You have data availability, exit window, proposer failure, sequencer failure, and state validation. And this is also known as the risk pizza, depending on how hungry you are. And we're going to go through each category and see where L2s are at the moment. So the first category, this should be a different slide, but it's state validation. So everyone is asking about optimism. Why don't you have fraud proofs? So when fraud proofs? And the answer to this is soon. They're working on it. They have the fraud proofs on testnet, and they may be releasing them actually this month, hopefully, or soon anyway, TM. So is that it? Optimism is not the only project working on fraud proofs, of course. You also have Arbitrum, which has fraud proofs on mainnet, but they're not perfect and they're permissioned at the moment because the challenge protocol can be subject to delay attacks. So are they working on this? The answer is yes, through the BOLD paper that's been released recently, which would allow permissionless validation for Arbitrum. When, again, soon, TM, you know? But there is hope for this to happen really in the next few weeks, hopefully. So it's not just about optimistic rollups, it's also ZK rollups. Of course, they have validity proofs, but they're not perfect. So this is an example from Linea in which they state in the docs that they do not prove 100% of EVM opcodes and precompiles in their validity proofs. So it's not just them. I actually think it's quite good that they show this in the docs. They show transparency and honesty. But other ZK rollups may have the same problem and not disclose it like Linea did. So moving to sequencer failure, you can see that there are optimistic rollups that can that allow users to self-sequence if the sequencer fails. But if you look at ZK rollups, situation is a bit worse. You have no mechanism for most of them. And you have some technical issues. As you see there, there are some transactions that may be too big to be proven inside the circuit, or they may have issues with allowing users to post any kind of data that is not well structured in a transaction, and the circuit may be having difficulty proving. But there are also proposals here for getting around these issues for ZK rollups as well. Yes, moving on to proposer failure, you have something like Arbitrum that allows a proposer to be permissionless if it stops proposing state rules for a week. So there are some mechanisms for optimistic rollups. For example, then there is Polygon ZKVM that can prove but not sequence blocks. You have Chroma, in which there are some edge cases that are not supported, so the Security Council needs to step in. And it's actually the same for something that was released this week, the Tycho layer 2, that they have what they call the based sequencing, but and permissionless proposer is approving, but they have the Security Council that can still revoke instances in this case of SGX proofs. So there are improvements to be made there too. Optimism, you have no fraud proofs. Then you have Starknet, ZK-Sync, ERA, and Scroll that are just not there yet, but they could do something like Polygon ZK EVM. You have exit window. So basically how long the users have to exit the system in case of an unwanted upgrade. And if you look at this chart, you only have Arbitrum with 2 days. It's actually more than that, but it needs to take into account the value it takes to account time locks, the transaction delay, the challenge period. So at the end of the day, it comes out to 2 days, which is not much for users to exit the system. And if you want to actually calculate this, there is a script from my colleague, Luca Donno, that allows you to do that. And for the others, unfortunately, it's all red. They're not they're working on that, but they're not allowing a big enough window yet. Another section is data availability. Data availability, basically, where is the transaction data batch posted? It can be Ethereum or can be an alternate data availability layer. It's very important, and we show both on the website of having a DA layer and also a DA bridge. If it's Ethereum, the DA bridge will be enshrined. If it's outside of Ethereum, you would need a DA bridge to prove that the data was made available on this alternative DA layer at some point in time. And that's very important because if there isn't any, then you cannot prove that to Ethereum, and that's very bad. We say that, we show that in red, and you can see this on ETHDublin website for each rollup. So how do you actually evaluate this combination between DA layer and DA bridge? We have developed a risk framework for it. It's data availability risk framework proposal. It's out now. It's on the governance forum of ETHDublin. So we're looking for feedback on it. So if you are interested in data availability or you want to provide your feedback, please go check it out and leave your comment. And this framework has 5 dimensions as well. You have economic security, fraud detection mechanism, attestation security, exit window, and accessibility, which relates to if the data availability layer is enshrined, so on-chain on Ethereum or not enshrined. So we looked at the state of rollups now, but we started actually with the stages framework a year ago, and in 1 year, no rollup has actually moved into stages. So the difference in the single categories, they take into consideration risk independently, while the stages framework kind of evaluates the whole complexity of how these categories can play with each other and influence each other. So no rollup has moved in stages in the last year, but there is actually confidence that this will change soon for top rollups, like mentioned earlier. Optimism is one of them, then ZK-Sync ERA and Polygon ZK EVM. So there is hope. What about L3s, you may ask, which are becoming more popular? So the risks for L3s is not trivial because it's not just the single risk of the L2 and the single risk of the L3s, but combined together, they may create additional risk, especially when there is a challenge period involved. And so it's important to evaluate them as a whole as well to make sure that we especially show the risks correctly to users. Something else we're working on is on state validation is you have contracts on the blockchain that are pretty easy to verify what they're running. You go on Etherscan, you pull up a smart contract, and you see that there is a code. Anyone can do it. But when you're actually thinking about these ZK verifiers, how they look on chain, they look something like this, which is not very easy and straightforward for the average user to actually get an understanding of what's going on. And so we're developing this ZK catalog led by Luca Donno that is basically a community-driven resource offering insights on ZK technology of all these projects. So we're trying to show what is ZK technology is for each project, what circuit are they using, what proving system are they using, and if we can actually verify this information ourselves by checking the code. And fun fact is actually the first verification we tried with the WorkCoin circuit was unsuccessful, and that's because Circom is not deterministic when producing the R1CS5. So there's more work to be done there. As conclusion, doing your own research is crucial, and the process should be accessible as possible for everyone. Progress towards decentralization is being made. We should continue to show that we care strongly about these values. And ETHDublin's mission is to actually keep this project accountable so that we can reach that faster. And that's it. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
Which L2 are you excited about? Short-term, mid-term, long-term?
Yeah, there are many. I mean, we're looking at the technology for all of them. Last week, there was actually Tycho being released that had lots of potential. The way they launched is not perfect yet. They have some permissions that hopefully will be removed at some point. But I think those innovative designs are very interesting to me, and I hope we get more of them.
What's your view on like long-term upgradability mechanisms? My understanding is that a lot of these projects don't want to have immutable contracts on Ethereum. So what's like the kind of end game for these systems being able to upgrade?
Yeah, I mean, my view is that you may always need upgradability because of the changes to Ethereum. You need to be able to stay up to date with what's happening on Ethereum if there is some EVM changes that may create incompatibility between the L1 and the L2. So upgradability is not negative per se, but you still need to give users enough time to exit if they don't agree with any of the upgrades. And that's what we're trying to reflect into the stages framework. I mean, a rollup will only get to stage 2 if they allow 30 days for the users to exit. So that's plenty of time for anyone to, if they disagree with the upgrade or they don't feel safe with it. Anyone else?
Do you think we're going to see hundreds of rollups, or are they going to consolidate further to just a couple?
Yeah.
There's already like maybe a couple winners, but
yeah, on the website we have I think 40 active already, and about the same probably in the upcoming section. And we have seen movements about many more coming, so we're going to see hundreds for sure.
and then with like L3s as well.
Yeah.
Does that lead to thousands?
Probably 1,000 rollups. We're preparing for 1,000 rollups, so yeah, it's going to happen, I think. Anyone else? Okay, thank you guys.
Alright, thanks everyone for hanging around. There's going to be a panel starting in a couple of minutes. We're just going to get chairs set up. So if you want to stretch legs, feel free, but we'll be starting in about 5 minutes or so. Thank you.
There are 2 slides.
get on stage. Whoever you want yourselves, whoever comes with us, maybe you can match these.
Yes. That.
Right, you don't need to do anything with this now. Good. Good.
Guys, could we ask everybody to move up to the front set of seats? This is about community, and the closer we are together, the more of a community we are. Hope you don't mind. We'd love to see you in the front rows.